I remember that day as if it were burned into my memory. I woke up early in the clear, hot morning of October 2020, my heart full of hope and worry. I had heard many stories about the End SARS protest, but nothing could have prepared me for what I would see at Lekki toll gate that day. I set out from my small home in Lagos with a group of close friends. We carried handmade signs and our voices full of determination. The air was thick with heat and anticipation as we made our way toward the toll gate. I kept thinking of my family, my future, and the many times I had seen police violence in the news. I felt a strong need to stand up for what was right. As we reached the busy Lekki toll gate, the scene before me was both inspiring and heavy with tension. Hundreds of young people, old and young alike, gathered on the broad road. There was a mix of songs, chants, and the rhythmic beat of drums. I stood there with my friends, our eyes fixed on the toll gate that had become a symbol of our struggle. We hoped for change, for a day when fear would no longer rule our lives. For a while, the protest felt peaceful. We marched together, our voices rising in unison, echoing against the tall, looming structures of the toll gate. I felt a surge of unity with everyone around me. The chants of End SARS filled the air and brought tears of both joy and sorrow to my eyes. I had not known that such passion could burn in so many hearts. Then, as the day wore on, the mood began to shift. I noticed police vehicles arriving, their engines humming a threatening note. I saw uniformed men stepping out with eyes that showed no fear. My heart pounded faster. The atmosphere, once filled with hope, grew cold with uncertainty and dread. I stood close to my friends, clutching my sign, and listened as the sound of marching boots mixed with our chants. We felt that our voices were strong enough to bring change. But then, unexpected chaos broke out. I recall the sound of loud shouts and the piercing crack of gunfire. In that moment, time slowed down. I saw smoke rising, saw people falling to the ground, and heard the desperate cries of those in pain. I was frozen by fear and sorrow. I remember a friend calling out to me, her voice shaking as she urged me to run. In that instant, I realized that our peaceful protest had turned into a scene of real tragedy. I ran with my heart pounding, dodging the chaos, trying to find a safe space away from the terror unfolding around the toll gate. As I made my way through the panicked crowd, I saw scenes that I would never forget. I saw a young man, not much older than me, lying on the road with his eyes wide open in shock. I saw a mother holding her child close, both of them crying and trying to escape the barrage of sound and fear. The toll gate, which had once symbolized hope for a new future, had become a place of deep sorrow and loss. In the midst of the chaos, I found a small alley where a few of us took cover. There, we huddled together and tried to make sense of what was happening. I could hear distant cries, the sound of hurried footsteps, and the occasional sound of gunfire. My heart ached as I thought about all the dreams and lives that were being shattered in that moment. I felt a deep sadness for the people who had lost so much, and a burning anger that such violence could happen in our country. I began to ask myself how something that had started as a call for justice could turn into a scene of such brutal tragedy. I thought about the many stories I had heard about police brutality and how our voices had been ignored for so long. In that moment, I realized that the true tragedy was not only in the violence but in the loss of trust and hope that our people felt. As the hours passed, the chaos slowly began to fade. The heavy air of fear was replaced by a deep, lingering silence. I walked out from the alley and looked back at Lekki toll gate. There, in the early evening light, I saw the remnants of the protest, discarded signs, broken objects, and a quiet sadness that hung over everything. I knew that the toll gate would never be the same. It was now marked by the memories of that tragic day. Over the next few days, I struggled to process what I had witnessed. I walked the streets of Lagos with a heavy heart, often stopping to gaze at the toll gate. I met many people who shared their stories with me, stories of loss, of fear, and of a longing for change. Some told me of friends they had lost, while others spoke in harsh tones about the bravery and sacrifice of those who had dared to protest. I found myself writing down every detail in a small notebook, as if by capturing the events in words, I could help heal the wounds that the day had inflicted. I wrote about the faces of the people who had protested with me, the sound of our united chants, and the sudden explosion of violence that had shattered our dreams. I wrote about the fear in my own heart and the anger that still burned inside me, a desire for justice and a better future for Nigeria. In the weeks that followed, the memory of that day at Lekki toll gate continued to haunt me. I joined community meetings and spoke with elders, activists, and even some who had been part of the security forces. I listened carefully to every story, every perspective, and I tried to understand how we could move forward. We talked about our shared dreams for a Nigeria where our voices mattered and where people would not live in fear of those meant to protect them. I realized that the tragedy of that day was not just about the loss of lives or the physical damage, but about the loss of innocence and the deep wound that it left on our society. Many of us had come together to demand change, only to be met with a force that crushed our hopes. The experience left me with a heavy heart but also a strong determination to never let our voices be silenced. In the months that followed, I became more involved in community efforts to seek justice and to rebuild trust between the people and the authorities. I attended peaceful vigils, participated in community dialogues, and even spoke at small gatherings about the need for accountability and change. I learned that healing would not come quickly. It was a long road filled with both setbacks and small victories. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit by my window and look up at the dark sky, remembering the red moon and the haunting sounds of that day. I would close my eyes and try to see the faces of those I had lost, the people who had given so much in the hope of a better Nigeria. Those memories drove me to work harder, to speak louder, and to never forget what happened at Lekki toll gate. I remember the stories shared by my friends. One friend told me about how she had held onto her little brother tightly as they ran away from the chaos, and another friend described the look of quiet despair on the face of an elderly man who had been watching the protest from a distance. Each story added a layer of pain, but also a sense of duty to remember. We were all part of a history that demanded that we never forget the cost of our struggle. I began to understand that the tragedy was also a call to action. It showed us the deep wounds in our system, the need for real change, and the importance of standing together in the face of injustice. I found that even in the midst of sorrow, there was hope that through unity and determination, our country could rise from the ashes of that dark day. Now, when I walk past Lekki toll gate, I feel a mix of emotions. The place is marked by memory, a memory of pain, of loss, but also of the courage and resilience of the people who stood there that day. I see young people talking about what happened, and I see hope in their eyes. They remind me that the struggle for justice is not in vain. I tell my story to anyone who will listen, not to spread hate or sorrow, but to remind us all that every life lost that day has a value. I speak in simple words, hoping that my truth will inspire others to keep fighting for change and to hold the memory of that day close to their hearts. It is a story of tragedy, yes, but also of the unyielding spirit of a people who refuse to be broken. In the end, I believe that from the deepest wounds, we can learn to heal. The pain of that day will always be with us, but it is our duty to transform that pain into a force for good, a force that pushes us toward a future where justice, peace, and respect for human life are not just dreams, but realities. The memory of Lekki toll gate, with all its sorrow, continues to guide me every day, reminding me that even in the darkest hours, the light of hope must never be dimmed.